we'll start. We call this the warm-up period, so get people to come in here so we can get this thing going. I want to introduce briefly Kevin, who's city council person in Thousand Oaks. He has a little plan for you people that are candidates. He is speaking to all the candidates.
Good to see all of you. Can I have a big cheer for the CRA who put this on? Especially Lori Mills. Lori, where are you? Lori did a great job putting this on. My name is Kevin McNamee. I am a city council member in Thousand Oaks, 14 months into the office and loving every minute of it. 2016, I got up one morning and turned to my wife and I says, I'm running for city council. And like every good wife, she says, why? And I explained to her that somewhere along the way, our country, our state, our county, our city has lost its way. And I want to make a difference. I'm not going to lay down and let it be taken over by people who have a different vision of government than our original founders. So I ran for city council in 2018 and again in 2020. 2020, 2 seats were open. I was up against 8 candidates. I had to beat 2 of them. They outspent me 3-1 and 4-1. And because I had something they didn't have. They had the money, but I had the capital of volunteers that were willing to get there, get my name out and my message to the voters of Thousand Oaks. I won by 79 votes. I am now known as Landslide McNamee. Point I'm making is that it doesn't take money necessarily to win an election. What it takes is a candidate with a good platform, a good message, and getting that message out to the voters. That's where all of you come in. Candidates will ask you for your support. What does that support mean? I'm going to give you details, and I want to give you an example of how that got me elected. It's called the 30-30 plan. You pick up 4 packets of 30 flyers, door flyers, from the candidates you like. They're all out there. There's 4 directions in the compass: north, south, east, and west. When you go out and walk your neighborhood for 30 minutes tonight, you walk in one direction, put 1 flyer on each doorstep. Don't knock on the door. Just do your evening walk for 30 minutes, put 30 flyers out. Even better, get your spouse on the other side of the street, do 30 flyers. Next night, walk in the other direction and hit all 4 directions of the compass over the next 4 nights. Let's play with the numbers. We have 400 people here with 120 flyers. That's 480,000 impressions that you make in the county of Ventura. That is great marketing. Find the candidate you can get behind and support. After we're done today, walk over to their table. 4 packets of 30 or 120 flyers, 30 packets each night. Walk for 30 minutes, each direction, the next night, the other night. And before you know it, you've made a hell of an impression of the voters that are going to get your candidate elected. The hard part is getting the messaging out. It doesn't take a lot of money. It takes a lot of volunteers, of people like you that want to make a difference. Do you want to make a difference in your county? Do you want to make a difference in our state? Do you want to make a difference in California? So stop complaining to your spouse. She's tired of hearing it. Stop complaining to your neighbor. They're tired of hearing it. Get out and take action. I've just given you one of something that's very powerful. Get out, take action, walk door to door, just put it on the doorstep, 30 minutes each night for the next 4 nights. I challenge each and every one of you, and I thank you for your time. Best to all.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That was great. We appreciate it. I'm going to ask Pastor Rick to make his way up here. Pastor Rick is a pastor from Godspeak Church, better known as Political Central in Ventura County. Before I do, what Kevin said is absolutely true. Our goal at the CRA Ventura County is to have 2,000 volunteers, signed up member volunteers in Ventura County to cover all 5 of our districts in Ventura County. Please visit our booth, get a brochure, and learn about us. We are from a national organization, which is the National Federated Republican Assembly, and then we report, if you would, to the California Assembly. And like has been said here before, we're the conscience of the Republican Party. Started in 1935 86 years ago when another president was trying, and Congress was trying to take our country towards socialism. 86 years later, what do we got? We have another madman trying to take us into Marxism. We are not going to let that happen. With that, Pastor Rick is going to lead us in prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'd like to ask Lori Mills to come to the center stage.
Would you pray with me? We're going to seek the Lord and ask for His help, keeping our county free with good leadership. Father, we thank you for your goodness. And Lord, liberty is not man's idea, it's yours. And Lord, we pray that you would bring freedom. You tell us where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And Lord, we're in a dangerous season of our republic where socialists want to move in and take away that freedom and bring oppression. And Lord, we pray that you would raise up leaders that understand freedom. Lord, we pray that you would encourage wonderful people with strong gifting to get into the races in these coming years to make a stand for freedom, for our nation, that love you and love our nation. Lord, we want to give our nation to our children and our grandchildren, and we want it to be a free nation and not a nation of oppression with tyrants. So Lord, we're asking for your grace and we're asking for your help, and we're praying that as people are free, Lord Jesus, that you would draw them to yourself, that they might know you, truly the Son that can set them free. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Would you stand with me? We're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
There must be a flag somewhere.
This is the closest flag we got right here. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. You may be seated. We are starting a organization, or have in this last couple of months, called Free Ventura. And it was John Barrick, he was with us last month for our inaugural event. And he said, Free Ventura, through common sense leadership, is not an organization, but it's a movement. Because we are all here because of what we see going on in the nation. We see what's going on in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and we don't want it to come to our backyard, right? And so everything rises or falls on good leadership. And so Free Ventura, we have an event at Godspeak this Wednesday night at 6:30. And our desire is to really motivate and awaken those who are conservative in our county with a bigger voice for freedom and liberty. Working with the CRA, working with any organization within our county that has conservative ideals, that believe that people should be free, government should be limited, personal freedom should be large, and that we can give our communities to our children and grandchildren with more liberty than we've enjoyed. And if you're a blessed man like me, that I love the Lord, filled with faith, and I love our nation, I want to hand that heritage down to other individuals. And so we're doing a monthly event just like this event, but wanting to mobilize more people. How many people are you talking to that are just not awakened to the reality and the danger in which we're in? And so we want to wake up the entire Ventura County. And we can't save all of California, but we can save our backyard. God bless you guys.
Thank you very much, Rick. Now, where is that famous Lori Mills? If it wasn't for her, there wouldn't be this event. Speaking of events, our next event's going to be April the 12th at the Thousand Oaks Inn. And have you guys ever heard about the 2020 election? Have you kind of heard, like maybe 40 to 50% of the people in America think it was fraud? Well, we're going to have a huge event on April the 12th, where we're bringing in a specialist, and Lori's going to tell you about that. In addition to that, I wanted to announce the fact that Lori filed her papers and is running for the 42nd Congressional Assembly District for state of California. So let's give Lori a big hand. She is the chairman of this event, and she's the vice president of District 4 Simi Valley for the CRA. We just need to find another 2 or 3 just like her.
Hey, thank you everybody for coming. I know it's warm out, so I won't take up too much of your time. Our event on April 12th, we have Army Captain Seth Keschel coming. If anybody knows who he is, he's military intelligence, and he was a witness at the Arizona audit. He's also been featured on War Room Pandemic with Steve Bannon. So if anybody wants to come to that event, tickets are on sale now, and we'll let you know. Now, I did just file my paperwork yesterday to run for state assembly in District 42 against Jackie Irwin. So you now all get the privilege of hearing my very first 2-minute speech. I'm a native Californian, businesswoman, accomplished businesswoman at that, wife, mother, grandmother, with a son going into boot camp in the United States Marine Corps this summer. I've spent my entire career working in the private sector, and if you guys would have asked me a year ago if I'd be running for office, I would have laughed. I just can't watch our state being destroyed by a bunch of woke-topians. I strongly support law and order and equal justice under the law. We need to untie our law enforcement's hands and let them do their jobs to keep our neighborhoods safe. We need to let our officers and courts work with ICE once again, so criminal aliens do not viciously prey on our communities or law-abiding migrants. We need to increase the budget for law enforcement and make sure they have the best training tools to de-escalate crime without use of force when possible. Ronald Reagan once said, "We must reject the idea that every time laws are broken, society is guilty and not the lawbreaker." My opponent's yes vote on SB 10 allowed violent criminals out of jail. These no-cash bail laws has helped achieve a spike in crime. If someone commits a violent crime, they should not be released back into our communities. A man in Thousand Oaks emailed me his story, and he may be here today. One of his neighbors, an armed man, jumped several backyards, shot up a house, and broke into a neighbor's home. A woman and her teenage daughter were trapped upstairs. He was arrested, yet released 3 days later. This neighborhood is now living in fear because the man, a year later, still has not gone to court. No cash bail is dangerous. We need to focus on victims' rights. We need to create laws that protect the people, not the criminal. We need to end the revolving door of crime in our neighborhoods. For those that think that police shouldn't do their job, here's a free tip. Police will leave you alone if you don't do illegal stuff. I believe California is worth fighting for. It's not perfect, and I cannot promise you I'll win every battle. But I will promise you this. I will refuse to be silenced, and I will never quit on you. Police in the room, I'm going to stand by your side. And I ask all of you for the same commitment today. I'm Lori Mills, running for State Assembly District 42. And now for our main event. I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, United States Air Force retired, is a former Republican congressional candidate, military combat pilot, distinguished White House military aide, best-selling author, popular conservative public speaker, and talk show host. Among Patterson's books are New York Times bestsellers, Dereliction of Duty and Reckless Disregard. His most recent books are War Crimes and Conduct Unbecoming. Patterson served 20 years as a pilot on active duty in the United States Air Force and saw tours of duty worldwide, including combat operations in Grenada, Bosnia, the Persian Gulf, Somalia, Rwanda, and Haiti. From 1996 to 1998, Colonel Patterson was military aide to President Bill Clinton. During that time, he served at the right hand of the president and Mrs. Hillary Clinton and was responsible for the president's emergency satchel, otherwise known as the nuclear football. The black bag, nation's nuclear capability that accompanies the president at all times. As such, Patterson had an office at the bedroom in the White House and accompanied the first family at all times. In addition, Colonel Patterson was operational commander for military units assigned to the White House, including Air Force One, Marine One, Camp David, and the White House Transportation Agency. Anyways, and it feels good, but it's going to blow the tents away. Anyways, I'm happy to introduce Colonel Buzz Patterson.
Yeah, that sounds good. Good afternoon, folks. We've got a gorgeous Southern California day, and it's my honor and privilege to be here to moderate debates with candidates that I think will directly affect our daily life. For example, I'm a husband and a father of 3 children, and I want the safest possible Ventura County that we can offer our families and our kids, and it's just an honor to be here. Couple rules first. How this is going to work. We'll have the candidates up here. Hopefully, the sun will allow us to not have to shift continuously through the day. But candidates up here. Each candidate will get 5 minutes to make opening remarks. Then I'll start asking questions from the community that you all have submitted of each of the candidates. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to address that issue or to offer their answer. And if one of the candidates counters the other candidate, then we're going to do a 30-second rebuttal for that candidate that has been challenged. So I'd really appreciate it. So this is a law enforcement forum, and I used to carry the nuclear football, so don't upset us. Just try to be as quiet as you possibly can. No, I'm kidding. Just refrain from outbursts if you can. Please, no heckling. Please save your applause for the beginning and the end if you can. It's incumbent. I've been up here before as a candidate for office, and I can tell you it's really important that we give these gentlemen the time and the opportunity that they deserve and they've earned to answer your questions that you have deserved an answer to. So, any questions about the rules? And what I'm going to do also, I'm going to so that one particular candidate's not getting the first question every single time, we'll just go back and forth, and we'll do it that way and make it as equitable as we possibly can. So I'd like to invite Sheriff Ayub up to the step, and Commander Fryoff. Everybody okay over there? Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. So I think we're going to start. I'm going to start with the sheriff and allow him 5 minutes to tell you about what he's about. And then we'll do the same thing for the commander, and then we'll start into your questions. Again, we'd like to keep this as succinct. We've got about an hour for the sheriff candidates, and we got about an hour for the district attorneys. So let's try to keep this as we can. It's going to get a little warm out here. So, Sheriff, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you this afternoon. I'm Sheriff Bill Ayub. I've been your sheriff for the last 3.5 years. I'm a 36-year law enforcement veteran. Spent my life service, my entire adult life committed to serving this community and working to keep it safe. Born and raised in Ventura, so were my parents, and my grandfather was an early Venturan, and we're proud to be members of this community for 3 generations, and our 4th generation is making Ventura County their home as well. I'm fully invested in this county. Public safety is my passion. That's why I continue to serve, why I want to serve. I was drawn into this profession early on. My youth minister became a deputy sheriff. He was one of my young idols at the time. I thought he was the coolest guy, and when he became a deputy, it made me think that this guy, I really like this guy. He's not the hardened Adam 12, Dirty Harry guy that I was watching on television. He is just a nice man, cares about people, inspired me to look at this type of profession. I don't come from a long line of law enforcement. In fact, I have no law enforcement in my history, and not likely to have any that follow me as well. But it was something that I was inspired to do, and I've enjoyed doing for all these years. I started out as basically a custodian in Santa Paula Police Department, and I was hooked immediately. I decided I enjoyed the excitement, I enjoyed the camaraderie, I felt like I was a member of a team, I felt like I was making a difference in the community. Although I wasn't a policeman, I quickly became a reserve officer, a dispatcher. I went to the Port Hueneme Police Department. I did those same things there and worked at both agencies while going to college. I wanted as much experience as I could get. And back then, you had to be competitive to get hired as a police officer in Ventura County. And we were turning away good applicants. Today, we have those same high standards, but we struggle to find people. There's just not people that are wanting to do that job today. But for me, I was immediately hooked. I wanted to finish my college. I did. I became a full-time police officer in Port Hueneme. I went to Las Vegas for a few years and worked some very tough neighborhoods there. And then I came back to the sheriff's office in 1996, where I've worked ever since. And I started as a deputy sheriff working in the jail. I worked my way up through all of the ranks to the appointed position of assistant sheriff, which is at the executive level. There I was mentored by Sheriff Jeff Dean, taken to state sheriffs and major county sheriffs of America meetings. I developed relationships with sheriffs across the state, in California, across the country, and I learned what it was like to get it to lead a law enforcement agency. It was incredibly valuable. And when I ran for sheriff the first time, I ran unopposed, and so I didn't do a whole lot of this. But in the meantime, I've communicated with the community regularly. It's part of my job. Part of my responsibility is being accountable to the public, and that's what I've done for the last 3.5 years as your sheriff. When I came into office, I had several goals. I certainly did not realize we would be cleaning up in the aftermath of the borderline mass violence. I didn't know there was going to be 2 major wildfires burning. I didn't know we were going to be facing a global pandemic, social unrest, or any of the other challenges this community's faced. But we have overcome those things, and many of the things I wanted to do, such as leveraging technology, improving our deputies' training and equipment, working to hire the best and the brightest employees, we've done those things. We've had many accomplishments despite those challenges, and it's been a very successful first term. I look forward to serving you for another 4 years, keeping Ventura County's crime rate at historic lows while it's skyrocketing in other places. And it's something that we do collaboratively by having the best people, by having great training, and by having very strong relationships with our public. So thank you very much for being here. Commander Fryhoff.
All right, thank you. I've also spent my entire adult life in law enforcement. I was a cadet in Pasadena, where I grew up. I was a cadet at 18. I got hired on as a deputy 31 years ago at 19 years old. I've done my entire law enforcement professional career with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. In this assignment, I've had the opportunity to work all over our county. I'm a 2-time Officer of the Year award winner. I received the Medal of Valor for an officer of all shooting I had early on in my career. I received my master's degree from the University of Oklahoma in administrative leadership. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy. It's a 10-week course in Quantico, Virginia, with 225 officers from 23 countries and nearly all 50 states. I still maintain contact with those officers today so we can share information on how to keep our communities safe. My last several assignments was I was the Assistant Chief of Police in Thousand Oaks for 5 years. I was the Chief of Police in Ojai for 3 years. I was the Chief of Police in Thousand Oaks for 1.5 years, and I am currently the Operations Commander for our Detention Services Division, which is the largest division in the Sheriff's Office. My career is really broken into 2 things that I've focused on: relationships and community programs, as well as developing our employees. So my community programs date back to when I was the Crime Prevention Sergeant in Thousand Oaks. I developed the threat assessment training that we provided to our schools on the heels of all the shootings we were seeing in schools across the nation to keep our teachers, our students, and the staff safe. I also developed the very first active shooter training called What If. You may have heard of Run, Hide, Fight, but before Run, Hide, Fight was in existence, What If was, what are you going to do in the event you're confronted with an active shooter? When I returned to Thousand Oaks as the Assistant Chief of Police, I got to develop a couple of programs with 2 different chiefs at the time. The first one was Stand Proud, and that was to address all the bullying we were seeing in our middle schools. One of the counselors came and said, we need to do something different. And we funded the training through the Sheriff's or the Police Foundation and in coordination with the school district to make sure all of our fifth graders going into middle school knew that they could work with other kids. They took them out of their friendship group, gave them assignments to work on together so they could accomplish goals and recognize that everybody had value. The other was an anti-gang program called Safe Passage. For our most at-risk communities, we raised money and were able to buy Chromebooks and Wi-Fi to make sure these kids had access to their school. We partnered with Cal Lutheran University, who allowed them to tutor the kids, and they would get a discount on their tuition for tutoring. We also partnered with the Park District. I also created the very first homeless liaison program in Thousand Oaks. As the assistant chief, one of the number one complaints I was receiving was on the increasing homelessness that we saw in our community. There's been some laws that have changed that make it very difficult to enforce laws against homeless. So I created the position so that that person could engage with all the nonprofits, the non-governmental organizations to bring services to those experiencing homelessness and at the same time hold them accountable. When I went to Ojai as the chief of police, I did the same thing up there. I didn't have extra staff in Ojai. It's a very small station. So I told officers, in addition to your normal duties, you are going to be my vulnerable population officers and work with the people experiencing homelessness here, because we need to do the same thing here. We're going to hold them accountable to keep our community safe, but also provide the resources so we don't have a revolving door problem, so they can get reconnected with family. Then I was assigned back to Thousand Oaks as the chief of police. I inherited a pandemic and social unrest, as the sheriff had mentioned. During the pandemic, I took a position of doing everything I could to keep our officers safe and our community healthy. The businesses were shut down, and I told our officers, I said, I want you to extra patrol our businesses because that's where the crime is going to occur. Drive through the grocery store parking lots. Be friendly, see people. Everybody is stressed out right now. They need to know that we're on their side. Then with the social unrest, I had the opportunity to reach out to the people who are organizing the local protests. And when I talked to them, I told them that your job is to make sure that we have a peaceful protest. We support your protest, and we're going to stay out of your way as long as you don't turn your protest into a riot. And they were very successful. And then I was assigned to our detention services where I currently serve. Now, as far as the development employees, I sit on the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force where I'm a mentor for all employees in the county, not just sheriff's employees. I'm also a mentor for sheriff's department employees. Employees seek out me routinely when they're testing for assignments or for promotion because I'm trying to guide future leaders. I'm not trying to cultivate future followers. I'm developing future leaders. I'm Jim Fryoff. I'm running for sheriff.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. So, Jim, we're going to start with you. You're going to get the first one today. This comes from Chris Roth. Given the rising crime rates, calls to defund the police, and lack of jail time for crimes like smash and grab, how would you motivate and recruit new police officers?
Great question. So there's a challenge in recruiting law enforcement, not just here in Ventura County, but everywhere. But evidenced by the fact that I'm endorsed by pretty much every law enforcement agency in the county, we need a change in leadership so that officers are going to want to come for work for organizations that are going to keep you safe. Law enforcement is a challenging time right now. The calls for defunding are misplaced. There is definitely where law enforcement has been too much for too long for everybody. There are things that we shouldn't be going to. And right now we're still in a position where we're responding to calls that would be better served by others, or allow our dispatchers to guide them to services that don't need a law enforcement response. We have finite amount of services that are out there to keep you safe, and we want to be there for our community. If we support our officers, we're going to have more people that want to come here. The more we work to develop our community and we work with community partnerships to address their concerns, the more they're going to want to come and work for us because they can be part of the solution that they're not able to do right now. Right now, we are really focused on some of the wrong things as far as a statistic-driven policing model, which is arresting as many people as you can, writing as many tickets as you can, rather than focusing on outcomes. We need to make sure our officers have the ability to be available for the smash and grabs, the organized retail theft crews, the South American transnational gangs that are attacking our communities, that are doing our residential burglaries and our vehicle burglaries, and not putting the officers in a position where they're trying to have animosity with the community that we're trying to protect. And right now, that's how they feel. They're being forced into having negative interactions with the community rather than focusing on doing everything they can to keep us safe.
Sure. Same question, sir.
You know, I got to tell you, I disagree with a lot of what I just heard. I don't think now is the time to be soft on crime. We have police officers out in the community that are trained, well-equipped, well-educated in enforcing the law. It's one of the reasons we have the safest of the largest 15 counties in California. We are not seeing the spikes in crime in Ventura County. Well, we're seeing violent crime at the lowest rate it's ever been, and it is because of our intelligence-driven prosecution programs. It's because of our dedicated men and women that are out there enforcing the law, being curious, looking for violators, and keeping criminals at bay. We see permissive policies that you just heard about in Los Angeles. Those criminals are going in and out of custody, and they're coming to Ventura County and committing crimes here. And we're continuously going down to Los Angeles, tracking criminals down and bringing them to justice locally. I believe wholeheartedly in keeping this county safe, and the way to do it is through enforcement. It's also done through hiring the best and brightest people, the people that want to work and that want to go out there and work for you to keep this county safe. And the question was related to how do you hire people and get them into an environment that's a difficult place for people to want to work. We've gone through a lot of trouble to increase our communication with people through social media. We actually added a hiring bonus to entice lateral entry officers and deputies to come from other agencies. And it's something that's paying dividends today.
Thank you, sir. And a 30-second rebuttal.
I think you may have misunderstood. I'm not soft on crime at all. We're going to hold people accountable. We're going to hold the right people accountable to keep our community safe. That's why Ojai had the lowest crime rate when I was the chief. Thousand Oaks was the safest city in the nation when I was the chief, because I support our officers. I let them use the tools that we've given them to be successful. We are going to hold people accountable. We need our DA to be supportive and to keep them locked up, because we don't get to determine how that works. We do the good police work. We take people to jail. It's up to them to make sure that they're prosecuting them in the way they need to be. But make no mistake, I am not soft on crime. I am supportive of our officers and at the same time, supportive of our community. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, this question comes from Deb Baber, or Baber, I hope I didn't, Baber. This is a political one. This is going to be interesting to get the gentleman's takes on this. What is domestic terrorism, and how does one define insurrection? I'm glad these guys are the candidates, and I'm not this time. In January 2021, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors voted to condemn people in Washington, D.C. associated with the January 6 events. Do you agree with their decision? If yes, do you think it's within their jurisdiction to make such public statements on behalf of voters? And if you don't agree, why not? And as an addendum, Jackie Irwin voted for the January 6 committee that's going on right now. And a follow-up question would be, do you support the fact that January 6 protesters are being held still without due process in Washington, D.C.? And Sheriff, I'll get that to you.
Well, thank you for the question, Deb. I appreciate that. So Timothy McVeigh is a domestic terrorist, right? He plotted to kill people, destroy a building. He was targeting the federal government. I didn't see that at the Capitol a year and a half ago or so. But I don't believe in necessarily weighing in on events that happen thousands of miles away. I think we need to maintain our focus right here in Ventura County on what's important for us. I don't know enough details about who's being prosecuted out of that incident and what the machinations are of that process. I think that, my focus is, I'm a sheriff deputy, I'm a sheriff, and my job is to focus on public safety right here in Ventura County. And that's what I do. I look for problems. We have an intelligence unit. We're always looking for signs of concern in our community, things that impact us directly, things that affect your quality of life through safety. That's what I'm focused on. I'm not too interested in what's happening in other parts of the country or world. Sometimes those things do carry over here, and we take steps to make sure that we're prepared and able to mitigate those things. But largely, what happens other places is simply what happens other places. There's other people that are responsible for that.
Thank you, sir. Commander Fryhoff.
Yeah, and I would agree with the sheriff on that statement. What happened several thousand miles ago away was not our responsibility, nor was it necessarily responsible for that, or the responsibility of our elected officials locally to weigh in on it. However, we do have to be always alert for groups who are looking to upset the government on either side of our spectrum. People that are homegrown terrorists can be very dangerous. Timothy McVeigh, as was mentioned, that was a resident of somebody's community when they chose to attack our country. We cannot allow that type of behavior to go unnoticed. We do have our intelligence unit, but we also rely on our community to be able to tell us when something is not right. If we have positive relationships with our community, they're going to feel more comfortable talking to us about what they see so we can take action on it to keep all of us safe. There is no room for domestic terrorism in this country. We are Americans. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is near and dear to all of our hearts, unfortunately, here in Ventura County. And this question goes to you, Commander, first. The homeless problem is a growing issue in Ventura County. What do you think is causing this, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, very, very good question, and we are all seeing it. One thing that is true about homelessness is that, we have, like the sheriff has mentioned, we're a pretty low-crime county. But everybody gets to see homelessness because it's out there for all of us to see. And as I mentioned, when I was the assistant chief of police in Thousand Oaks, it was one of the number one calls I was receiving from complaints from the community. So I didn't just idly sit by and do nothing. I created a vulnerable population position to make sure that the resources that we have from the county, Veterans Affairs Administration, our nonprofits and non-governmental organizations could do something about it. Because most of these organizations will not go into a homeless encampment by themselves because it's dangerous. So having an officer go in there with them to make sure they can provide services is important. I went to Ojai and did the same thing. Like I mentioned, when I was in Ojai, we didn't have extra personnel. So I had to create a collateral assignment, first of its kind, to make sure that our officers were trained to deal with those experiencing homelessness, hold them accountable, and give them resources. We're not going to solve homelessness right in one simple sentence. The reality is there's no panacea for it. You show me 400 homeless people, I'm going to show you 400 reasons how they got there and 400 ways to get them out of it. We need as a state and a country to invest more in mental health services and substance abuse treatment for families who are struggling, because the majority of the people who are experiencing homelessness now either have significant mental health disorders or substance abuse disorders, or both. Thank you.
Before we hear the sheriff's response, I want you guys to understand, you can see that we grew up wearing uniforms. We all got the same memo about the blue suit and the power red tie, and so there's that. Okay, sir, homelessness in Ventura County.
Thank you. Priority number one, it's a top issue in every community that we have, and I'll tell you exactly what's driving it. We saw a reduction in the state prison population. 10 years ago, there was 180,000 inmates in the state prison. Today, there are 90,000. Many of those went to county jails, where the low-level offenders were pushed out and face very little consequence, and they're in the community, making up a large percentage of that homeless population. Others from the state prison reduction have gone into the community without any type of support. They struggle with drug addiction, they struggle with mental illness, sometimes they coexist, one exacerbated by the other. And that is what's driving homelessness in the community. Permissive policies on drug use, a lack of adequate resources to care for the mentally ill, and the reduction of prison and jail populations by state policies. We locally have formed a 20-person homeless liaison unit task force. We took 600 tons of garbage out of the Santa Clara River watershed that was accrued by homeless people that were camped out in the bushes there. We scraped away a lot of the brush, and we've conducted regular patrols there to make sure that doesn't return. That's all that stuff that would have washed into the watershed, poisoned our coastline, and created all sorts of problems. We have been narrowly laser focused on homelessness in the communities the sheriff polices, and the 20-person unit is accessible to the other agencies as well. Oxnard PD used that unit. We collaborated with Ventura PD, and we're working with Caltrans and the Highway Patrol now to clean up the homeless problem.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, sir. And we'll come back to you, Sheriff. This is up to you. And this is from Tracy Fryhoff. Who has endorsed you, and why is it important to you?
Thanks for that question. My opponent mentioned that police agencies everywhere endorsed him. Police unions have, that's to be sure. I'm very proud of my endorsements. I'm endorsed by all 4 living Ventura County sheriffs, almost every active duty sheriff in the state of California. I'm endorsed by Congress members, previous Congress members, and a current Congress member, various elected officials, and most important to me, the men and women that have served in command level positions with the sheriff's office over the last several decades. Nearly every one of them who knows both candidates, who knows what I've had to endure in my first term, and have studied and care about this community and this agency, those people endorse me. They know what it takes to get this job done, and that to me is what matters. They have nothing to gain from giving an endorsement other than professional, honorable, dedicated police management, police leadership. And so that's what's important to me.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, yes, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, our Corrections Office Association, the Service Employees International Union, those are the 3 associations that make up all the employees from the Sheriff's Office that are represented by associations have endorsed me. The fact that all the current employees associations have endorsed me is very telling that there's a lack of leadership that we need to address. If everything was fine, I wouldn't be running for sheriff. Our deputies and our employees need to be supported. I've also been supported by Wainimi Police Office Association, Santa Paula Police Office Association, Oxnard Police Office Association, Simi Police Office Association, the entire Ojai City Council, the entire Moore Park City Council, contract cities of ours, the mayor and a council member in Fillmore, the majority of the Simi Valley City Council. These communities know what I bring to the table when it comes to working with a community, developing employees, and solving problems, holding people accountable, not permissive policies, arresting people that need to go to jail, holding people accountable. They know I'm up to the task, and I know it's been said several times that only the union member board voted for me. Well, our corrections officers actually did a vote. 99% of the corrections officers working for the organization endorsed me. I'm very proud of having the endorsement of the members of the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. I'm running for them and my community.
And a rebuttal from the sheriff.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. If there was a vote that had a 99% vote turnout, I've never seen it. And I can tell you that our Deputy Sheriff's Association conducted no poll, did no inventory of deputies' opinions. They simply endorsed a year before the election of a person without even having a discussion with the incumbent sheriff, who has no scandals, unblemished record, has kept crime low, has provided training and equipment for the deputies and supported them in every way. The other unions, as I learned when I was eagerly endorsed by the Deputy Sheriff's Association when I ran the first time, lock arms and join at the hip with the other unions simply because that's how it's done. I have good friends that are on labor unions and other agencies, and they tell me that that is how it's done. I saw it firsthand when I ran the first time. And to me, without even having a discussion with the candidates, casting an endorsement is very hollow.
Sure. We're going to give Commander Fryoff a 30-second rebuttal as well, then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah. The unions that I went and sought out endorsed me, even though my challenger also sought them out. This wasn't just a handout by the associations to endorse me. It was because they know I have a strong leadership background. I'm here to represent our community. I'm here to keep us safe. I'm here to represent the employees so we can recruit and retain the most talented deputy sheriffs that we have and employees we have with the sheriff's office anywhere. Thank you.
Okay, sir, if you'll stay up. This one's coming to you. Another local issue that's impacting families and children everywhere is fentanyl. This comes from Matt Paul. I would like to know, what is your plan to deal with the rise of fentanyl overdoses in the area, as previous methods haven't yielded satisfactory results?
Fentanyl and all other illegal narcotics are devastating to our communities. There's no doubt. We've seen families ripped apart. I've got friends who have had family members who have passed away from drug overdoses. We need to do everything we can to hold these people who are bringing illegal narcotics into our community and hold them accountable. Arrest them, put them in jail, so we can protect the rest of our community. Fentanyl is by far one of the most dangerous drugs that's ever hit the market. They're able to smuggle it into our jails where I currently work. We have people overdosing inside the jail as well. If we would not have had Narcan or naloxone, which is a reverser for fentanyl, the number of deaths we would see in our community would be staggering. We need to do everything we can to work with all of our allied agencies to ensure we're working together to keep our community safe, to avoid this drug and the others coming with it coming into Ventura County. Thank you.
So fentanyl is one of the biggest challenges in the illicit drug world that we've seen, certainly in my career. For those of you that don't know, it's a synthetic opiate, more than 50 times powerful than heroin. It was spurred on by what was an illicit opiate market on the pharmaceutical side. We saw overprescribing doctors in the early 2000s putting opiate drugs out into the community as pain relievers. And they were abused, they were used as party drugs, and created an epidemic of opiate addicts in our community. Today we see it used recreationally as a cutting agent. It's pressed into tablet form illegally, where it looks like a pharmaceutical grade drug, and kids take it and they're taking a lethal dose. The Department of Justice has pushed out a report that 3 out of every 10 opiate-based drugs on the street that appear to be pharmaceuticals actually contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. It's a catastrophic issue affecting every socioeconomic, every class of life in our community. I put Narcan in every one of our deputies' cars. Just the other day, we had 2 deputies conducting a warrant search at a residence in the San Fernando Valley get dosed with fentanyl accidentally. They got into a bag that happened to have it in there. It became airborne. A deputy lost consciousness and was seriously injured from this. The second deputy rescued her, who was exposed as well. Both were hospitalized, and thankfully we had that Narcan with them deployed in the community. We're saving lives every day. Our deputies are saving lives with it. And it's in the jails. It's with our detectives. It's within our patrol force, and it's something I'm really proud to have instituted here.
Thank you. Okay, this is interesting. Just coming out of the COVID crisis, and I don't know who submitted this question, but it's a good one. And you'll start off first, sir. What is your position on using Sheriff's Department resources to enforce COVID-like health department orders, particularly those targeting constitutionally protected functions such as gun shops, churches, the right to assemble, etc.?
Thank you. Great question. Now, during the pandemic, I didn't have the benefit of having the inside conversations with the health director and those who were making the decisions on behalf of our organization. But I think that we can all look at what occurred and realize that locking down and shutting down all of our businesses permanently was probably not necessary. There was a lot of uncertainty at the time that we didn't know about. And I know I talked to one of the gun store owners in Thousand Oaks afterwards, and he was really upset that the gun store was shut down and asked me about it. And I said, I don't know what conversations the sheriff was having with the health director because I wasn't part of those conversations. I go, so I'm not sure what led to the decision to make that a non-essential business or not. I know that for the churches when they were closed, I had sent several emails to the sheriff to make sure that what the DOJ was putting out saying they're a First Amendment protected activity. We want to make sure we're making the best decisions for our community. Obviously, we had some churches that remained open. And law enforcement had no interaction with them at all. We were able to maintain an education platform, which was our goal all along, was to just make sure that dealing with this hand of unknown. But the reality is, I wasn't at the seat at the time. I didn't get the backside information of what was taking place. The information from Dr. Levin, the sheriff was. Thank you.
So we had no playbook for COVID. We had a pandemic plan. I'd seen it many times. Hadn't given it a whole lot of thought, because I thought, like many of you, our medical system was kind of above this. We would avoid such problems. We had nobody to talk to. We had an epidemic in the early 1900s. We learned some lessons from that. I was involved in all those conversations. I heard the discussions. The decisions to close businesses were passed down by the state health officer, which was the governor. And in some cases where a county all counties are subdivisions of the state. And if the state does not have a health officer, they defer to the governor's order. Ventura County has a health officer, and that person imposed even stricter requirements on top of the governor's order. Our role, and I was very clear about this from the beginning and throughout the pandemic to this day, was that our position would be one of education. We would let people know what the health order's directives were, but that enforcement would be a last resort. And enforcement was never something that we had to turn to. I was asked about, well, why wouldn't you just declare that we will never enforce those? I will not take a tool away from my deputies that could allow them to solve a problem in the community. What that problem might have been, I didn't know, but I'm not going to take tools away from our deputies to do their job. Now, what happens in the future, I would expect will be similar if there was ever another pandemic upon us. I think this is behind us. And I think we learn from what happened, and we grow with those experiences, and we adapt the next time something like this comes our way. Hopefully, we don't see it in our lifetimes.
Hey, Sheriff, this is back to you. This question comes from Orshia Rios. What makes a sheriff trustworthy and not just another politician to vote for?
Yeah. So sheriffs are elected officials. Politicians are different, in my view. Of course, I have to run for office. I have to shake hands and kiss babies and do those things. One of the things I prided myself on as a sheriff was that people didn't know my name necessarily. And the reason being is because I want people in our community to feel comfortable with their public safety. I want them not to worry about it. And if they don't know my name, it means everything's going smoothly. And there's no issues, and things are being managed properly. Accountability to the public is very important. It was something that was tested in the periods of time with the social unrest in our community. We had members of the activist community coming to us and talking about, actually creating a narrative that was false about excessive uses of force, about disparate ways in which we enforce the law, in which we stop people in the community. And I created a dashboard, public-facing dashboard that people can go to, and they can look at incidents when we use force and compare them with the number of times we conduct encounters with people in the community. And traffic stop data, stop data that's displayed for people to review and digest at their leisure, if they're interested in doing that. That's what builds trust. It's maintaining openness and transparency, being responsible to the community, engaging with the community when appropriate, and letting them know how we do things and why we do things. I hired a public information officer, focused solely on social media. So if you follow us on social media, you'll see a massive amount of new data, new information coming out there, just to let you know how we're doing things and why we're doing them.
All right, thank you. Yes, Arsha, accountability, transparency, communication. I actually believe the opposite, that your community should know who the sheriff is. They should know who you are because you're out there talking to them. You're hearing what their concerns are. In this time that I've been able to get out and precinct walk, I get to do the thing that I love the most, and that's talk to the people that we serve. I'm a public servant and have been my entire adult life. I love talking to the people that we represent to find out what they feel makes them feel unsafe. Because what I may think makes them unsafe may not be the same thing. It's important for me to hear from them what is it that's bothering them, and then also for our officers to have that same mindset and latitude that they can work with our community so that we can keep them safe. We are here to serve you. That is what our job is. That's what I pride myself on doing, having honesty, integrity, leadership, and sticking up for our community and for our employees. Thank you.
Okay, along the same vein, this question comes from Maggie, and she asks, what is your vision for the future of the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, and how have you accomplished or assisted in achieving those goals?
Thank you very much. So the vision is building these community partnerships to address the crime trends that we are seeing in our community. By hearing from our communities, which are individualized, There's some carryover between communities, but there are some where the communities have a specific need. Having these partnerships is going to allow us to address their areas, to keep them safe, and to make pivots to deal with crime increasing, homelessness, things that I have done throughout my career where I don't need a playbook to be able to solve those. Homelessness was an issue. I started a solution for it in the area that I had control. When I went to Ojai, I did the same thing. Having assignments that you can create. Our directed enforcement team used to be called Bike Patrol in Thousand Oaks. It was great because they could ride around and talk to the community. But the reality was I was having more community concerns and quality of life issues that we had to address. So I changed the team and called it a directed enforcement unit where they could be used to make sure we were addressing the specific crimes that were occurring in our community to keep them safe. This is what we do. We have to be able to pivot, make decisions so we can keep our communities safe. Thank you.
So my vision for the future of the office, and we've been moving in that direction for 3.5 years now. The borderline accelerated it. We did a critical review of our response to that incident. We found gaps. I created a report and issued it to the public. You may have seen it. And that is part of the direction I wanted to move. I wanted to increase transparency. I wanted to improve communication with the public. We've done those things through adding a public information officer, through adding data and remodeling our website, through increasing our means by which the public can communicate with us through a smartphone application that was developed. I really enjoy leveraging technology, and it's been kind of a theme throughout my career. Data analytics, I mentioned, we created some dashboards. We have a lot of other things that are coming with that, and I'm excited to roll those out in the future. I also was really interested when I came into office, and I've moved in this direction of improving our training. Our training is to me always been lacking. And I wanted to form a full-time training bureau. We had 2 people that worked on training at our police academy, a couple part-time people that worked at our firearms range. And I really wanted to improve that so that we would be more capable, more ready, and better prepared to handle anything that comes along in our community. And we saw some shortcomings in our training at the borderline. And so this accelerated that plan. I created an advanced patrol training team. They go to stations, they train deputies where they work with the equipment they work with in the communities where they work. I intend to expand that and consolidate that training for a countywide training cadre. So my time's up, apparently.
Thank you very much, sir. And then back to you, sir. We'll kick it off with you again. Along the same lines, actually, a lot of people are interested about the future, or curious about the future. So the question comes from Caleb Standifer. To what extent can technologies be implemented which will increase the effectiveness of the department and lower the cost of operating the department? And please describe those technologies.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes. To what extent can technologies be implemented which will increase the effectiveness of the department and lower the operating costs of the department? And can you please describe those possible technologies?
Sure. One of the things we do is I mentioned intelligence-driven prosecution unit. We've got an incredibly talented crime analysis and intelligence analysis unit. This unit processes data that, we at levels and in ways in which we've never been able to do before. It allows us to be more effective, to target the right people in the community. We have people that are prolific offenders. They drive crime up. Those processes are things that help us keep our community safe and have been for years now. The people that work in there are not police officers. They have a much lower cost to the agency, so we save money in that respect. I mentioned our SAS and our data analytics. That tool is kind of like Google for our vast stores of data. We've collected data for years in the form of traffic citations and field interview cards and arrests, and we have access to court data and so forth. We can now access all those things in one place. It allows us to get information into the hands of deputies in the field so they can be more effective and efficient, and it saves us time and resources and makes us far more capable in tracking down criminal activity and then ultimately prosecuting that activity in the courts. These things are things that are developing over time. We see a really great potential in our human resources side with our data analytics too, looking at complaints and what types of things employees that become problematic may have in common, and things that will allow us to hire and recruit in a much more effective way.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Commander?
Thank you. Technology is definitely an advantage for law enforcement. One thing you have to always keep in mind with technology as you advance it is you don't want to ever be on the bleeding edge of technology. The leading edge, but you don't want to invest in things that are not usable several months later. So technology can be very tricky. As one of my finance advisors that I had when I worked in Ojai had said is, having technology is like having a puppy. Yeah, the puppy costs you $400. Then you got to feed it. Then you got to take it to the doctor, to the vet. Technology is a lot the same way. So it's important to make sure that we use technology in a very smart way, that we use trusted technology, and that we have good employees, as was mentioned in our crime analysis unit, that are not officers, that are paid less, that are very valuable. They're not paid what they're worth. I'll tell you right now, they do a phenomenal job of being able to provide the information for our officers to focus their efforts in the areas that we need to keep us all safe. This is where technology is an advantage, and it's just important that we always remember that technology comes with costs, recurring technology has costs, and we need to make sure that we're very sensitive to that, to not overspend our budget and your money. Thank you.
Okay, folks, that concludes the question and answer period for the sheriff candidates. So now they each get 5 minutes for final remarks. Sir?
Well, thank you. Appreciate you all listening this afternoon. I know it's tough baking out in the heat there. There's one candidate on the stage that has a record to stand on. And it's great to have ideas and views on what you may or may not do when you get into a position. It's very different when you get there. And I had some very different ideas about the time commitments that I would have available to me and how things would work out and the challenges that I would have to overcome. We just simply don't know. As I mentioned, day one, my first day of office was one day after the borderline violence. 2 major wildfires burning at the same time, planning the services of our fallen hero, Sergeant Ron Helis. I never expected to have to deal with any of those things ever, let alone my first week in the office. And I ask you to look at our community, and if you're members of the community, you feel pretty safe here. I know you do. That's one of the things we love about Ventura County. You come over the hill from Los Angeles into Ventura County, you breathe a sigh of relief because it is safe. It's a great place to live. And I take a great deal of pride in making that so. That's been my life's work. Public service is not just about working for the government and providing a service to the public. It's about giving back as well. And I think about that, and volunteerism is one of the things that's most passionate to me. I've been a volunteer in this community for more than 4 decades. As a Cub Scout, a Boy Scout, a high school athlete, and well into my adulthood. Even now, as busy as I am, I'm on 2 boards of directors for major charitable organizations that serve the needy. That's public service in my book, and something I'm really proud of. I love serving this community. I love our deputies, our employees, regardless of whether their unions give me their endorsement or not. And they know from what I've provided for them for the upgrades in equipment and training, new helicopters, new buildings, new command posts that are on their way. I've always supported pay increases for them, supported a hiring bonus for employees to come and work here, even larger bonus for people to lateral here because we have staff shortages. Not because people are fleeing the agency, but because we had to cancel an academy class. We have shortages of staff, not because it's a toxic work environment, but because we had to protect our employees and close an academy class because we didn't know how to make it work with all the COVID restrictions. So that's where I'm at. My goal, and I could quite comfortably retire at the end of this term. This is not a financial benefit for me. In fact, it would behoove me and be of my benefit to retire and do something else. I want to serve this community still. And that's where I come from, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on June 7th. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. 31 years proven track record of building community relationships, keeping our community safe, low crime, and positive engagement with our employees. I also sit on the Behavioral Health Advisory Board for the county as a law enforcement representative, and also on the Prevention Services Subcommittee of that. I'm also the commander overseeing peer support. I was a captain overseeing peer support. It was a logical choice, and I volunteered to take it after having been through an officer-involved shooting and not being supported by the administration that existed then. We didn't have programs like peer support back then. It's really important for the wellness of our officers to feel supported. All the items that we can buy are about managing things. What we need is people to lead people. That's how we get the job done. That's how we keep our community safe, is by leading the people that serve the sheriff's office. I'm going to read you a quote. Jim has a broad depth of public safety experience with an emphasis in community-oriented policing and problem solving. He has a strong work ethic, high professional standards, and the courage to take a risk with innovative programs and approaches to policing. Jim's experience level and previous positions held with the Thousand Oaks Police Department, including that of Assistant Chief, make him a natural and strong selection to lead the city's police services into the future. Sheriff Abe. I'm Jim Fryoff, and I'm running for sheriff. Thank you.
Well, thank you, guys. This concludes the first half of our program today. Then we're going to alternate asking questions that you all, the audience, submitted between the different candidates, and then we'll finish up with 5 minutes at the end, closing remarks for the candidates. And if any candidate wants to try to rebut the opposing candidate, we'll give them 30 seconds at the very end of that question to go from there. But let's start with Eric first as the incumbent, and 5 minutes, please, sir.
Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking Buzz Patterson, the California Republican Assembly, Lori Mills, Dennis, and John Barrick, Senior Deputy District Attorney. I want to share with you a little bit about who I am and then talk about how we're keeping Ventura County safe. I am the product of Ukrainian immigrants. My mom was born in Kiev. My dad in a town called Cherkasy along the Dnieper River. They came here in 1950. They endured and overcame communism and fascism, two twin evils. They came to the Lower East Side in Lake City, Minnesota, and they worked hard. My dad became an aeronautical engineer on behalf of Hughes Aircraft Company, keeping our country safe during the Cold War. My mom, a public school teacher. I mention this because through this foundation, I found my values. A deep reverence for public safety and law and order. A powerful work ethic and a love for the country we call America. As your district attorney for the last 14 months, we have maintained a high quality of life and we have maintained a safe county. We have more prosecutors in the courtroom than at any time in our history, 107. We brought new resources for crime victims. We purchased the Family Justice Center across from Ventura County Medical Center to help victims with support, intervention, and outreach. We're going to be opening another Family Justice Center for victims in Oxnard shortly. This summer in March 2022, we will open a short-term domestic violence shelter to help break the intergenerational cycle of domestic violence abuse. We've taken specific actions against crimes that impact the East County. South American theft rings. 30 individuals were brought to us by local law enforcement. We have filed charges against 21. Felony charges, forgery, first-degree residential burglary, identity theft, conspiracy to commit first-degree residential burglary. We are taking on the shadow pandemic, specifically the spike in fentanyl cases and a rise in the seizure and possession of ghost guns. As of a couple weeks ago in the Ventura County District Attorney's Office, when a drug dealer takes a plea, and in that plea, they are acknowledging that they have sold fentanyl, we will advise them as follows. If you continue to sell fentanyl, and if, as a result of doing so, someone is killed, you can be charged with murder. This is how we keep Ventura County safe, and this is how we distinguish ourselves from other counties. Ventura County, unlike our southern counterpart, continues to send deputy district attorneys to parole hearings to advocate and represent victims before the parole board. We continue on a case-by-case basis to file gun enhancements and gang special allegations to take on and dismantle those who terrorize our streets and our communities. We continue to file on a case-by-case, circumstance-by-circumstance basis, special circumstances murder. We also continue, depending on the facts and the circumstances, to seek transfer to adult court when a juvenile commits an enumerated offense, and that offense, in the opinion of a supervisor and myself and the line district attorney, is premeditated, depraved, and warrants a transfer to adult court for more significant punishment. I'm very proud to serve as your district attorney. I'm proud to be before you today. I look forward to this forum, this discussion, and thank you for taking the time to hear what we both have to say.
Hey, John Barrett.
I have grown frustrated with laws and policies that shatter the security of our community. I have grown sickened by the fact that law enforcement are treated like criminals by so-called political leaders. And I am outraged that so-called self-interested career politicians stand by and do nothing while pretending to do something. Now, I've been a prosecutor in Ventura County for over 17 years. I'm actually the first candidate for this position to actually come from this county in decades. And in my 17 years, I prosecuted just about everything that walks and crawls in the office. I prosecuted some of the most complex and violent crimes our county has had in that time. I've prosecuted burglaries, robberies, child abuse, gang crimes, hate crimes, and murders, which is where I have been working for over the last 7 years. And throughout my entire time in the DA's office, I have had one guiding principle. I call it my number one rule, and it's the rule I live by in doing this job that I love so much. And that's victims come first. And for me, what that meant, that serving the public, serving you, serving the victims on these cases and their families was more important than my pride, my ego, and my professional career if necessary. I have never, ever, ever violated that rule. And I never will. And over the last few years in California, I've become frustrated. Now, mind you, I'm not a politician. I've never run for office in my life. I never had any interest in running for office. I had no interest in being the district attorney. But the last few years in California, I'd seen some things that really started to trouble me, that violated that rule. Number one, laws that violated victims' rights, that put your rights in danger, significantly hurting you without you knowing it. Number two was the fact that I didn't know about it. I'm a prosecutor in the DA's office. I prosecute homicides, and there were changes in the criminal justice system that I didn't know about. If I don't know about it, how is it that you're supposed to know about? I wouldn't find out until I get that email at the end of the year that would tell me some of the new laws. And some of the new laws were so frightening to me, my mouth would literally drop open. Number three, I don't like the way law enforcement was being treated. Things had switched in California, where the criminals are now the victims, and law enforcement are now the criminals. And all the while, victims and their rights are being marginalized and ignored, re-victimizing them all over again in the process. Lastly, I didn't like that self-interested political decisions were being made in the area of criminal justice. When you're running for DA, if you're going to be a prosecutor, it has to be to serve the public. Serve the public first. Solutions that are going to be real and not solutions that just sound good. Now, all of you here today are probably thinking that you're here to hear about our respective platforms. You are not. You are here today to determine what leadership is and what it is not. See, district attorney sets the tone in this county. The district attorney and how they operate and how they decide to work their office and work with their employees sets the tone for the type of county that you want. And what you're going to learn is that leadership is abiding by a set of guiding principles. It's going to be always put other people first. Give credit to people in the work that they do, and take the blame when they fail. What leadership is not is claiming innovations that you did not innovate, bragging about accomplishments that you did not accomplish, and changing your political platform when the political winds changed. If you have to tell people you're a leader, you are not. I look forward to your questions.
John, go ahead, please. First question will be coming to Mr. Barrett. It comes from Chris Roth. I live next door to the perpetrator of vandalism, illegal entry, and gun crimes that occurred in my Thousand Oaks neighborhood. This person was released without bail to live near the affected homes due to the California Supreme Court ruling People v. Humphrey, and has been awaiting trial for close to a year. How would you communicate and protect the victim's rights in my terrorized neighborhood?
Yeah, so in 2020, there was a vote by California voters that we did not want to eliminate cash bail. And then a fast one got pulled on us by the California Supreme Court, where they said, we don't care what the will of the people is. We think no cash bail is constitutional. So the reality is there's not a lot we can do. But someone needs to tell you that so you can fight. Now, what we can do is, number one, be far more aggressive in the hearings when people first get arraigned and fight for those to keep those people in custody and make a better argument in court. But number two, we have to allow our prosecutors to go out and speak to these family members, these people who are affected, the people in the community. Now, my understanding of that incident is that prosecutors have not been permitted to go and speak to the community, and they should. Because how can we know what you need if we aren't permitted to meet with you? So that's, I think, one of the best ways to help prevent this is to communicate properly with the community.
Thank you very much. Take a swing at that.
I'd be happy to take a swing at that. Our prosecutors routinely meet and interact with victims. In fact, I've encouraged a culture that does exactly that. When I came in, changed our public speaking and our outreach policy. We used to have a number of layers that you'd have to go through. I wanted to relax those layers so that my prosecutors, our prosecutors, could speak to schools, could speak to law enforcement, and most importantly, speak to victims. We have an outstanding victim advocate team. I'm very proud of the individuals that we have, approximately 35. They assist our prosecutors in helping victims, making sure they get the restraining orders they need, making sure they understand the court process, which is complex and technical and sometimes very intimidating. And then I just want to shift and talk a little bit about bail. Bail is still being set. I wish it was being set more. For example, the individual that was alleged to have killed his father here in Moore Park, he is now being held on bail. Two of the individuals who were alleged to have taken jewelry from a Kohl's here in Moore Park, they too had bail set. My deputy DAs, our deputy DAs, will continue to advocate for bail setting, and when the facts and circumstances warrant it, increases in bail. We used to have a very, what I believe, worthy and just something that I wish we could continue to rely on. It's still part of the equation, but it is not the entire equation. And that's called a pre-risk assessment that is done on each and every individual by our probation department. What they would do is they would look at somebody and they'd say, how many times have they failed to appear in court in the past? What's the community or public safety risk? Should they be let out? Do they have a substance use disorder? Do they have firearms? And they would score each individual on a metric scale. That would go to the judge, that would go to the defense, that too would go to the prosecutor, and that would be used to help guide bail decisions. That's still one factor among others, but I would very much like for that factor to be the one that's most important in our prosecutors determining whether or not bail should be set.
Okay, and a rebuttal, quick rebuttal from John Barrett. 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I actually had the honor of meeting some of the members of that community who were involved in that shooting where the individual was released from custody. And they were frustrated because when I spoke to them, they had not been permitted to speak to the district attorney representing them on that case.
Okay, next question to Eric. What do you believe is the best method for drug dealer prosecution versus drug user prosecution?
Drug dealers, you have to prosecute aggressively. They are pushing a deadly substance into our communities that gets into the hands of youth, that gets into the hands of our families. It is deeply uprooting. It has tremendous negative impacts. I talked about fentanyl. Let me just go ahead and share with you some statistics which are quite chilling. From 2015 to 2019 in the county of Ventura, we had approximately 37 fentanyl cases, that is either for sale or someone who was possessing it. For the years 2020 and 2021, that is the pandemic years, we had nearly 350. One, we do the admonition that I talked about. You sell this deadly drug, someone dies, you can be charged with murder. Secondly, we are now asking our prosecutors, if the facts and circumstances warrant it, to seek the aggravated term. In California, there's what we call a low term, a mid-term, and a high term. If a drug dealer is selling fentanyl, we're instructing the prosecutor to seek before the court the aggravated term. But also, we have to have public health messaging. We have to make sure that people do not take this. We have to make sure that our youth are informed about the problems inherent in this drug. And we also have to make sure that we are reaching out to schools, to communities, so they understand that drugs can kill. And if you take it once, specifically fentanyl, you can die. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. John?
Colonel, can you say the question again, please?
Yes. What do you believe is the best method for drug dealer prosecution versus drug user prosecution?
Well, the best thing we can do is to prosecute, and I would love to aggressively prosecute. But what you need to know is that the California State Legislature has really hamstrung us on our ability to prosecute drug dealers. The California State Legislature has almost made drug dealing and drug using a non-crime. We can talk about aggressively prosecuting and aggravated factors all we want. We cannot send someone to prison for dealing drugs. Did anyone here know that? Anyone not in law enforcement? No, of course not. We cannot send them to prison. Someone needs to tell you that. Drug use. Yes, you can be arrested. But because of a series of laws, and unfortunately I only have 90 seconds to answer this question, because of a series of laws, we can't prosecute them really anymore either. Police make the arrests, they immediately get released, and then we don't file charges. We don't file drug possession or drug under the influence cases anymore in the DA's office because the penalties are so small, it's not worth it. And so we need to change those laws. And you need a DA who's going to be a microphone to Sacramento to tell them to change those laws. Because politicians only respond to pressure, folks. And if you don't have a DA in your county who's willing to be that microphone and willing to put that pressure on Sacramento, all the talk about aggressive prosecution doesn't mean a thing.
And 30 seconds now for Eric.
Let me give you some specific concrete examples of how we stand up for victims. In May, I joined 44 other DAs in the state of California in seeking to block the release of violent felons from California state prisons. I did the same just a couple months ago. One of the court hearings is now stayed, meaning these individuals known as second strikers are not able to get out. Another way that we help our victims is we get funding and support for them. I received $1 million to form a family justice center in Oxnard. The cities of Oxnard and the county are going to expand that money and increase it. This is the way we take actions and we go ahead and help victims.
And 30 seconds now for John Burdick.
So I'm glad that Mr. Nazarenko joined in that list of those restraining orders. I want to point out, though, it wasn't his idea. He didn't file it. He didn't write it. All he did was add his name to a list. As you stand here and listen to us, you will never hear one thing about what Mr. Nazarenko did to prosecute those cases, to actually take the lead against these laws. And the reason is because the people who make the laws are in the club that Mr. Nazarenko wants to join. And if he criticizes those laws, they won't let him in. And so again, aggressive prosecution is great, but you have to mean it. I have a career and experience that shows that I am an aggressive prosecutor, and I will do everything I can to make sure that you're safe.
Oh, here we go. We're going to do another 30 seconds. This is getting good.
You know, this is an exchange that's worth having, and I just want to clarify. You know, 14 months ago, I stepped out of a courtroom into the job of district attorney. I was a sex crimes prosecutor. I specialized in child molestation and rape cases. In doing so, not only did I achieve the Prosecutor of the Year, but I also achieved some of the highest sentences in Ventura County history. People via Sorno, 384 years to life for somebody who had multiple molestation counts against them for harming children. People versus Bork, who had multiple child molestation counts over the course of 40 years. I stand for victims in the courthouse as well as in the office, and we get results for the people that we care about and need to protect.
Okay, we're going to go one more time with John, and then we're going to move on to another question.
I've been Ventura County Prosecutor of the Year twice, and I was awarded the 2014 Sherwood Prize for Combating Hate, which is a tri-county award and very prestigious, given by the Anti-Defamation League.
Okay, stay up there, John. We're going to move on to another topic. This comes from Deb Baber, who writes some really good questions, by the way. Is racism a crime? Let me give you a little more. That's why I'm glad you guys are up here doing this, and I am not. In November 2020, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors unanimously declared that racism is a public health crisis in the county. How do you define racism, and do you agree with the Board of Supervisors?
Yeah, so racism is not a crime, but it's obviously something we do not want in Ventura County. I prosecuted hate crimes for 6.5 years. And it's one of the 3 assignments that I've loved the most in the office. I loved prosecuting hate crimes. I prosecuted white supremacists. And so I don't agree with the Board of Supervisors resolution that Ventura County has that racism is a public health crisis. Racism is a problem, but it's not the only problem. And when you make a declaration against the people of Ventura County, you're basically saying that the people of Ventura County are racist and they need help. There are racists in Ventura County. And if they commit a crime against someone because of their perceived characteristics, which are protected by both the federal and state constitution, I have a history of coming down on them like you wouldn't believe. But that doesn't mean everyone in Ventura County is racist.
Thank you, John.
Hate crimes are something our office takes exceptionally seriously. There's a DA, Haley Moyer, who is assigned to these cases, and we're seeing, unfortunately, an uptick. We're seeing more cases now that are coming into our office than at any point in both 2019 and 2020. And what I share with people is the distinction between hate speech and a hate crime. And what I like to share with them specifically is it is despicable and horrible to use slurs and epithets. That is something we don't want in our society, and we want to make sure it is rooted out and stamped out. But if someone goes ahead and takes a specific act which is accompanied by that slur, such as throwing an object or hitting somebody, that now is a hate crime, because what motivated their behavior, what fueled that battery, that vandalism, was hate towards a specific cognizable group, and those groups warrant law enforcement's protection, and that's what we will continue to do as the Office of the District Attorney.
Let's take the first swing at this one. I'm not sure, do you guys get involved with death certificates and determination of death? Somebody has a question about COVID, and that doesn't fall within your guys.
I don't think so.
No, okay, we'll move on from that one. How are you going to keep gangs out of Ventura County? This comes from James Rabick. For me first? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
How do you keep gangs out of Ventura?
You know, there was a change in the state law which made it far more difficult for us to prosecute gang cases, and it took effect in January of 2022, just 2 months ago. Nonetheless, we continue to file gang allegations under the Street Terrorism Enforcement and Protection Act in Ventura County. Specifically, we have filed 12. I believe very strongly that gangs terrorize neighborhoods. They intimidate, they threaten, and they need to be dealt with swiftly and aggressively. So in the Office of the District Attorney, if the facts and circumstances warrant it, we will continue to file these special allegations which can increase punishment. It can be an extortion-based crime, robbery, it can be a number of different crimes, but in the Office of this District Attorney, we will continue to file those specific Penal Code Section 186.22 special offenses.
Well, I grew up in Oxnard, and I've been the victim of gang violence. And so when we talk about street gangs, it obviously means a great deal to me. Also because I prosecuted in the hardcore gang unit for 6.5 years. I prosecuted almost 25 gang trials, which is by far the most trials that anyone has prosecuted in that time frame. Let me tell you a little about Assembly Bill 333, which Mr. Nazarenko was referring to. It made it extremely difficult now for us to prosecute street gangs. And he's right about that. And so I've been writing a series of articles in the Conejo Guardian that get republished in the Citizens Journal. And I take on some of these issues that we've been having with these changes in the criminal justice reform that negatively affect crime victims. And I've written articles about AB 33, and I try to alert the public as to the problems to those. I wrote to our illustrious state senators, Monique Lamone and Henry Stern, to stop that legislation from passing. My letters and my pleas were ignored, of course. Those two people have endorsed Mr. Nazarenko.
Sure. I'd be happy to. Assembly Bill 333, I felt very strongly about it. And so strongly that I actually wrote and called the governor's office, and I asked them, veto this bill. Sure. And just to clarify something, Mr. Barrick, Jackie Irwin, who I have a strong relationship with, in fact, I'll be testifying on behalf of one of her bills on Tuesday, she voted against it. So, you know, somebody who supported Nazarenko also understood that this bill is not good for public safety. Now, with respect to the other state legislators who have endorsed me, I'm honored to have their support. I'm honored to have their endorsement. And I'll share with you why. Because they share my values, the need to partner, the need to reach out, the need to engage. And also, they are legislators in charge of a nearly $300 billion budget. So I believe, rather than pull away from legislators, we need to reach out to them. I've reached out to Congressmember Mike Garcia to talk about the Victims of Crime Act. I've talked to Congresswoman Julia Brownley to reauthorize the Victims Against Violence Act. Why? Because this brings money to Ventura to help victims, to secure justice, and to make sure that we have the resources in Ventura County that we need.
Another rebuttal from John.
So it's true, Mr. Nazarenko did write a letter to the governor asking him to not put forth or sign into law Assembly Bill 333. But only did that after I wrote my articles. I contacted the two senators I talked about in July. In August, I wrote an article in the Conejo Guardian about why we all need to stand up and fight against Assembly Bill 333. September is when his letter to the governor came out. And let me tell you something about a letter to the governor. There's two things. There's a saying people never let see get made: laws and sausages. Let me tell you about this sausage. If it's sitting on the governor's desk, it's because they know he's going to sign it. Writing a letter to the governor at that time when it's already sitting on his desk doesn't matter. It's perception. It's being perceived as being tough on crime instead of actually being tough on crime, instead of at least trying to lead the charge to do something to stop it. Let me give you another example. Senate Bill 81. I wrote an article in the Conejo Guardian on Senate Bill 81 in September. And what this Senate bill did, they're telling me I'm taking up too much time. What this Senate bill did was it completely hammered or kept reduced our ability to charge aggravating factors. October, guess what happened? Mr. Nazarenko wrote a letter to the governor asking him not to sign Senate Bill 81.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to do something a little bit different. We do have a handheld mic in the back, correct?
Yes.
So we're going to let you guys, if you have questions, ask questions directly of the gentleman here up here. We've only got about 15 minutes, so please keep your questions short. 15 minutes total for the questions, and then you guys will have, then the candidates will have 5 minutes at the very end to conclude with their remarks. But let's try to do this. This is not part of the plan here, but this should be a lot of fun. So we're going to take questions from the audience for about 15 minutes. Again, please keep them short. And where's the mic is? Right there. Okay.
I'd like to note each position you stand on removing Father Sarah, our founder of Ventura County, from the county seal, and removing him illegally from the statue in front of City Hall. What's your stance on that?
Let's try to keep this to criminal justice issues.
It's criminal. It was illegally removed.
Exactly. I knew better. Anyway, okay. Let's try to stick to more specific to appeal to these guys and directly will impact them and they're serving you. Yes, sir, in the back. With your hand up.
This goes directly to both of you. It'd be interesting to see what you say about how you compare yourselves with the District Attorney of Los Angeles and what he believes.
Awesome question. We'll start with Eric.
Well, I'll tell you, Jackie Lacey has endorsed me for a reason, because I very much believe in Jackie Lacey's approach to the criminal justice system rather than the person who succeeded her. I mentioned this in my opening, and I'll give you some, one from just a management perspective. Let me speak from that. You always meet with your line DAs first. Talk to them, meet with them, reach out to them, rather than just go ahead and issue blanket policy directives. One thing I don't like is just dogmatic orthodoxy, meaning it's going to be one way and one way only. I want to hear from people, I want to make sure they're informed, and I want to make sure they inform me. Secondly, we have a deep obligation to keep this county safe, and the way we do that is by making sure if enhancements are warranted, they're filed. If the juvenile needs to be transferred because it's premeditated and depraved and callous and heinous, we need to do so. We have to stand for victims to make sure that they're represented at parole hearings. And furthermore, we need to make sure that we take crime seriously, that we understand that there have to be consequences. We need to recognize that certain actions need to be taken for specific offenses. That's what we do as prosecutors.
Thank you, sir. Oh, yeah. Compare yourself to the LADA.
Yeah, so
you're going to come out looking good.
the Board of Supervisors did an interview of us January 26, 2021, and they actually asked that question, what we thought of George Gascon and some of his policies. And my answer was pretty succinct. I'm a pretty direct person. And my answer was this. I think George Gascon and his policies are a disaster for public safety. And if I, as a prosecutor, implemented half of the things that he's done, I'd be ashamed to call myself a prosecutor. That's your answer for Gascon.
Very good. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry. This gentleman over here, and then we'll come back to you, ma'am. Okay, you're next, okay? Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. My question is a statement, and I'm a citizen and absolutely a non-politician, former law enforcement guy, FBI, Marine. We are surrounded by lawlessness and skyrocketing crime. The LA County DA is shameful. We have the Mexican border to the south with fentanyl, human trafficking, COVID spreading, violent crime, and tears Santa Barbara County to the north, growing cannabis, related crime problems, dark buying. A simple question: how will each of you keep us safe?
So as a prosecutor for 17 years, I have, as I told you, dedicated myself to a guiding principle that the victims come first. I promise you I will do everything I can to keep you safe. So interesting note, because I know we were watching some of the sheriff's debate earlier, and it was the crime statistics came up. I've actually, I read a number of studies that are put out by the National Institute of Justice, and one of the prevailing themes of those studies is that a lot of the crime rates that cities and counties are using today, you have to take them with a grain of salt, right? Because 2020 and 2021 crime numbers are skewed because of COVID, because of the shutdown. Because the reality is, when people talk about being afraid, that's not coming out of nowhere, right? Right. Like that car, for example. It's the district attorney's responsibility to make sure that everyone feels safe and is safe in their homes. And like I said, Mr. Nazarenko and I are sort of hamstrung by some of the laws that have passed over the years that have taken the emphasis off crime victims and put it on criminals. We have to change those laws. Now, Mr. Nazarenko and I can't change them, right? That comes at the state level. But we can be a microphone to get these laws changed. Like I said earlier, politicians respond to pressure. And if you're not putting the pressure on them to keep you safe, they won't do it. Right now, the political climate is all about the criminals. It's all about helping them, and it's about making law enforcement feel like they're the criminals. And that has to stop. So you need a DA who's willing to meet with you, to tell you the truth about the things that are going on out there, and who's going to fight for you. And that's me.
One of my supporters is our former district attorney, Mike Bradbury, who was in this seat for 24 years, and he knows this job. He knows what it takes to be in a leadership position. And he wrote recently, and he said, keeping Ventura County safe doesn't simply happen by accident. It takes effort. It has to be conscious. It has to be deliberate. And we can't lower our guard. We're blessed in Ventura County. You look at crime rates in the 1990s. Per 1,000, both violent and property, in 30 for every 1,000. Today, 17.2, 17.5. One of the ways we achieve this is by making sure that we bring in talented and dedicated men and women into this office. You look at the investigators and the DAs that we've brought in, Catherine Plant, who's here from Fresno County. We have investigators who have come from Oxnard, LAPD, Long Beach, some of the best in blue right here in Ventura County. Our prosecutors from Cook County, Chicago, Vegas, they come here because they understand that this is a culture that cares about public safety, that has strong working relationship with our law enforcement partners, and that we will value them, their profession, and make sure that they get the resources they need to fight for all of you in our courtroom.
And a quick rebuttal from Mr. Barrett.
I agree with Mr. Nazarenko that a strong working relationship with law enforcement is important. When I decided to run, my first phone calls were to the police officer associations. And I know a lot of those guys, and I consider them very close friends of mine. And every one of them told me this: John, we love you. We respect you. We want you to be our DA. We think you would be great. We're not going to support you if we think you're going to lose. That's how a friend speaks to you. So what I said was totally fair. Watch my momentum. Watch what I do over the next several months. I have now been endorsed by every police officer association in this county. You need a DA who has a strong working relationship with law enforcement, because as we go into the 21st century, crime enforcement is changing, and we have to work together with law enforcement, not separate. And you need the DA who's been supported almost universally by law enforcement.
Okay, another question from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my question is, and it pertains to human trafficking, that is the most profitable criminal enterprise in the nation. So my specific question has to do is, what are you going to do to work with law enforcement to make sure victims are saved and the perpetrators are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
There is a bill by a state legislator, Grove, that will make human trafficking offenses what we call strike offenses. That is, more significant, higher punishments. I am in support of it. I have indicated my support to her as well as groups like Forever Found. We have in the district attorney's office a extremely dedicated and talented prosecutor who specializes in HT human trafficking cases. We bring perpetrators to justice. We participate in a countywide task force which works with federal and state entities as well as local law enforcement to suppress and attempt to dismantle human trafficking rings. But we can't let our guard down. We have to keep making sure that these crimes are prosecuted, that hopefully this legislation passes and they will become what we consider under California law violent offenses rather than non-violent offenses. These are cases that I have prosecuted as a sex crimes prosecutor, and I want to see the penalties and consequences increase even further for these very, very violent and deeply disturbing crimes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Nazarenko and I are in complete agreement about this. I actually give a series of talks on human trafficking around the county now. And so I'm very well aware of how prevalent it is and how disturbing it is. People in Ventura County, I know we like to think that we're safe and we want to be safe. But human trafficking is everywhere. Now, fortunately, in 2019, the District Attorney's Office received a grant with the help of the Sheriff's Department to create a task force to prosecute hate crime. And Mr. Nazarenko is correct. We have a great attorney who's prosecuting those. Unfortunately, she's leaving, but she's being replaced by another great attorney. So the office does take hate crimes very seriously, and they have been for a long time, at least since 2019. Any legislation that increases the penalties for people convicted of human trafficking on any level, and we're not just talking about sex trafficking, we're talking about labor trafficking as well, I am all for. I think there's a bill right now, Mr. Nazarenko just talked about, that would make human trafficking convictions a strike. I would love to see that passed. Thank you.
Sad. It's a sad state of affairs, really. I mean, that's just what parents have to deal with these days with their kids possibly being trafficked. It's just unbelievable. Another question in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. First, thank you both, gentlemen, for all your service to your community and fighting crime for all the years that you've been in office or helping. And so I have a few comments directed first at Mr. Nazarenko, and then I have a few questions if I can get them out. But at least I want to make these comments because you were actually my city council member for Ventura prior to being appointed to DA. And as such, you had some very biased declarations that you supported. The first one was in July of 2020 when you denounced racism and you denounced police brutality. Second proclamation that you did in October of 2020 that you supported was directly aimed at me and the people who supported me, and it was a proclamation denouncing white supremacy, specifically related to the Trump car caravan incident in front of City Hall when a group of Native Americans were praying. It was mentioned in the proclamation. That was the exact reason why you did the white supremacy declaration, and in my opinion, that is hate speech directed at an entire group of your residents. And I'd like to know how you're going to keep that bias out of the office when you're running for district attorney. Now, the question in relation to hate crimes, you both have mentioned hate crimes, and it's something you're very...
Could I just interrupt you and have him answer the first question first?
Sure,
and then
what was
come
the
back?
first question?
Well, you talk about how
are you going to keep your bias out of the office?
Sorry, yeah.
And we'll come back to...
Yeah, and thank you for the question. You know, Lady Justice wears a blindfold for a reason, and that is to avoid bias, prejudice. It doesn't see red, it doesn't see blue, it just sees justice. So that's how I serve as your district attorney. I want you to know that. You know, we follow facts, We follow evidence. We apply the law fairly. We use the body of law that is our penal and our evidence code and other bodies of state law, and we abide by Supreme Court, California Appellate Court, and other court decisions. This is the framework that I operate as your district attorney, and I will continue to do that in the months and years ahead.
Okay, then we'll take one more question from you, and then we're going to have to give the candidates their time to closing remarks. So please, one more question from the audience, and then we'll let these gentlemen close everything up for us.
Let's pass it on to one other person.
Okay.
Can you guys ask a joint one, maybe?
Listen, this is regarding, it's a totally separate issue. I have a lot more, obviously, that I could speak to Mr. Nazarenko about because I know him pretty well. Well, I know him not personally, but I know him well because I'm very familiar with what goes on in the city of Ventura. City of Ventura has the highest crime rate in the county. We had over 90,000 calls for service in the year 2020. Out of those, 11 rose to the occasion of a hate crime. So it's interesting that you guys continue to focus on hate crimes when you have that extraordinary number of crimes being committed in your city, just the city, let alone the county. We are the highest in the county. So my next question, because in our city specifically, we have about less than 500 vagrants in the community. They take up 50% of the resources for fire and police combined, and for both departments separately, right? And you're focused on hate crimes. The second question is, as the county district attorney, and this goes for both of you, would you eliminate the special department that handles the vagrants in the community? They have their own special department that when they're given tickets for whatever they're doing, they do a lot of horrible things in our city that go completely unnoticed, right? It just gets shoved aside. So we want to know, are you going to do something differently? Are they going to start getting treated like the rest of us? That if I defecated or peed on the street, I'm not going to get a little ticket and been sent on my way? Or are they going to get prosecuted for the crimes they commit?
Yeah, to answer your question, I know homelessness is a real problem in the county. The vast majority of homelessness is due to drugs. Now, an interesting thing about the drug use is I think Californians spoke pretty loudly that we don't want to crowd our jails with people who have substance abuse problems. But we have a problem in the way the state of California goes about it. And it's because we want people to get treatment. But the way we used to be able to get those people treatment was by holding jail over their head. Well, because the penalties are so low now, they don't even get jail anymore. They get arrested, they go to jail, they get booked, they're released almost immediately, and we don't file the cases. So Californians don't want our jails crowded with drug users, but they basically decriminalize most of the drug laws, including drug sales. And now the state of California, including in Ventura County, is handing out meth pipes and needles.
No.
So, hold on. So, to answer your question, we have a homeless court because we don't want to crowd our criminal justice system with what basically amount to minor offenses. And I know they're not minor to you, and I respect that. But we don't want to crowd our criminal justice system with infractions, with tickets, and that sort of thing. But my motto is, and my guiding principle is, victims come first. And if a homeless person commits a crime and hurts another person, I will prosecute them.
All right. I would just add to that, you may know, when I served as the city's mayor, I helped increase funding for both our police force as well as our firefighters. That meant more firefighters and more police officers on Ventura streets. We have a member here of the Ventura Police Department. It's an outstanding agency. They have the Patrol Task Force, which specializes in homeless, vagrancy-based crimes. They also have the Ambassador Program, which former Mayor Cheryl Heitman initiated. These are good programs that work. More needs to be done, but I feel that we are making a difference in Ventura in terms of reunifying families, addressing vagrancy, and making sure that we enjoy a high quality of life in a fantastic beach community.
I have a question for both of you. I met a woman who was attacked at the Jan's Mall, hit with a pipe by a gentleman who was on his fourth violent crime. Whatever happened to the 3 strikes you're outlaw? And why wasn't that imposed on him?
And this will be our last question from the audience, and then we're going to do closing arguments.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, to answer that question, I don't know the facts of circumstances of your crime, and that sounds awful. Why that person was out after having 3 previous strikes or 4 previous strikes, I don't know. He shouldn't have been. We prosecute the best we can, but that is unacceptable, and that shouldn't have happened to you.
Okay, it's going to be time. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you want to go ahead and give me the name of the offender, the date of offense, I'll be happy to go ahead and look into it. We can find out the status of that case. So just want you to know that I'm happy to make sure that some follow-up is done.
Okay, now it's time for our candidates' final statements. We're going to start with Mr. Barrick first, 5 minutes for each candidate. And Mr. Barrick.
The state of California has adopted a policy when it comes to crime victims. And that policy is a twofold question. To anyone who commits a crime, state legislatures ask you, who did you hurt and how can I help you? I promise you this, our current slate of state legislators do not care one bit about crime victims. And I can say that freely and openly because I've seen the laws that they've passed over the last several years. Remember, one of my frustrations was the fact that these laws are being passed and no one in my field especially is doing anything or saying anything to stop it. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can change things. We can elect people who aren't career politicians, who are self-serving and only interested in the next highest office. We can elect people who are dedicated to victims' rights. We can elect people who are dedicated to serving you before they serve themselves. We can elect people who want to stand up for law enforcement and the great work they do keeping us safe. We can elect people who will not allow politics to enter into the decision-making process. You know, there's a saying I go by, a rule, another rule. And that's, if you really want to get to know someone, know their friends. Well, that rule holds true too in politics. When I made the decision to run for district attorney, understand that I consider myself a frontline worker. I'm a guy who gets in the trenches. I roll up my sleeves and I get into work. Roll up my sleeves and get to work. I'm the one who gets down in the dirt with other first responders like police officers and firemen and do the jobs that you need done to keep you safe. Given that, my first phone calls were to cops, were to law enforcement, were to other first responders, people who work on the front lines, like I do, in keeping you safe. Mr. Nazarenko's first phone calls were to politicians. Career politicians who stood by and did nothing while these laws that have so negatively affected your lives have been passed over and over and over again. I think on this stage today, you've learned a lot about the two candidates and our differences and our different approaches to putting victims first and to making sure that everyone stays safe in this county. But the reasons you should support me aren't only because I'm from Ventura County, not only because I grew up here, not only because I've dedicated my life to a guiding principle of putting victims first, not only because I want to stand up for law enforcement and the great work they do keeping us safe, not only because I'm not a career politician, and not only because I will not allow politics to enter into my decision-making process. The reason you want me as your DA is this. One day, one of you or a loved one will become a victim of a serious crime. And I promise you, when that day comes, if it does, I'm the one you want in your corner. Because I will give you everything I have to bring back your dignity and to restore justice that you deserve. I want to thank the California Republican Assembly for holding this. I want to thank Mr. Nazarenko. I want to thank Colonel Patterson. And vote for John Barrick for District Attorney. Thank you.
I too want to thank all of you. this is a healthy exchange because it underscores and I think underlines as well just sort of a distinction in our leadership styles. I want to network, collaborate, and partner to get results and to fight for all of you. Because when you partner, collaborate, and build relationships, you get help for crime victims, you get better outcomes for justice, and you secure what we need for the county of Ventura and its residents. Let me give you some specific examples. Shortly after I was appointed district attorney, I was able to receive 2 additional prosecutors in the office of the district attorney, bringing our level to 107. I also was able to secure a grant that helps to fund a prosecutor to go after dating violence, stalking, and DV crimes. Just a couple weeks ago, we received $2.5 million to form the first ever cold case sexual assault unit in the district attorney's office to have the long arm of the law reach back and hold perpetrators and offenders of sexual assault potentially accountable for their conduct. This is how I believe you want your district attorney to work on your behalf, to fight in the courtroom, to get resources for victims, and to make sure that justice is served. You know, I'm very proud of a broad bipartisan network that I have assembled. People like Jeff Dean, your supervisor, Supervisor Bob Huber, Mayor Pro Tem Elaine Lister, Simi Valley Police Chief David Livingstone. Broad, bipartisan, across the aisle. That's the way you govern a county like Ventura. You make sure that you don't see one way or the other. You see justice, you see resources, and you figure out how to bring them to your prosecutors so they can fight and do the job of justice in the courtroom. We have been able to hire, just in the last 14 months, 13 new prosecutors and 6 additional investigators. They're working for you, they're protecting public safety, and they're making sure that we get results for Ventura County residents and its victims. I too want to thank Colonel Patterson, Lori. I also want to thank the California Republican Assembly for all of you for spending time on an afternoon to hear about our views, our philosophies, and how I, as your district attorney, will continue to keep all of you safe.
How about a round of applause, guys, for the candidates today, not only the district attorney candidates, but also the sheriff candidates. You guys are embodying what American politics should be all about. Trust me, I ran for Congress in 2022, and I'm 2020 up in Sacramento County for U.S. Congress, and you guys embody what being American is all about. Please support these candidates, ask them questions, be there for them, and serve them. If they ask you to serve them, please serve them, because that's how this process works. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, one quick more point. I'm officially endorsing Lori Mills for U.S. Congress. Thanks a lot, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Can you turn it on, Mike? Don't leave. We're gonna announce the basket and the raffle winner. I want to thank Mr. Nosarenko, Buzz, and John, and all of you for coming. There was a recurring theme on this stage today, and that was the legislation. The legislation. The legislation is holding us back. What I've been watching is a bunch of career politicians play musical chairs. Isn't it time to elect the people again? Trust me, I'm not taking this job to make the money. It's going to be a pay cut for me. I'm one of the top 2% in the nation in real estate. So this is not, I want a job to make the money. This is a job because I am scared to death that we're losing this country and this state, and we need to take it back by electing the people. So anyways, thank you very much.